submitter online. Kia ora, Paul.
Kia ora.
It's Pamela Story here, Chair of the Waikato Regional Council. Thank you very much for joining us today. Councillors do have your submission and have read it. So you've got 5 minutes to speak. So if you would like to ensure there's some time for questions, then you might want to shorten up your presentation, but over to you. All right?
Thank you very much. So I'm Paul Kington. I'm the acting chairperson of the Otama Reserves Group. I'm also a long-term resident at Otama. So we've basically been established as the Reserves Group for approximately 10 years. We have a working agreement with DOC on the DOC reserves. And specifically, we're talking about the Otama Wetland Reserve, which is split into 2 reserves. The area is now classed as high biodiversity value, and this is directly in recognition of the high number of critical, endangered, or at risk or declining bird species and plant species. When the reserve group started our work, the term degraded was used in relevant documentation. The wetland is approximately 26 hectares and is fed by the Otama River and the Pekapikaro stream. The org has an active web page for relevant information if you wanted to refer to that. The org, through fundraising efforts and budget allocations, has produced the Otama Wetland Restoration Action Plan, which I forwarded to you. The plan is basically our guideline and gives us historical and present day perspectives and data and information in regards to the wetland. We would like to use that plan and its guidelines in relation to the wetland reserves, the lagoon, and the opening of the river mouth. We'd reference section 8.3 in relation to the opening of the Otama river mouth. The Otama river mouth closing is a natural event occurring generally during summer and autumn, and is associated with rainfall levels and natural sand bar buildup. At the moment, the Otama river mouth is closed. The Otama river mouth lagoon is a known nesting site for the New Zealand dotterel, oyster catchers, and the lagoon area itself supports a healthy population of approximately 13 nesting shags. Protection of the natural hydrology of the wetland and lagoon is important for maintaining the natural characteristics of this area and along with the habitat it creates. The Otama wetlands and associated river and stream supports a very wide range of bird life during inundation, and there is a visual increase in populations during these times. Documented photos of bittern are taken during times of inundation, and the watercourse provides habitat, food, and is also visually pleasing. There are 3 significant cultural sites in and around the Otama Lagoon river mouth: the Irapa, the trading post, and the village pa sites. Our submission is in support of the proposed WRC plan as it aligns with the wetland restoration plan. But also we also support the mouth opening during prolonged closure when water quality declines significantly and impacts natural wildlife value. And also of note, full inundation happens here in Otama when the river mouth is open, and it's tidal inundation as well as storm events. So that's basically in a nutshell. We support the proposal. to have it regulated, the opening and closing of the Otama River mouth, or at least consulted on. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Paul. Councillors, are there any questions for Paul? Any points of clarification? If not, Councillor Clarkson, do you want to?
Well, I'd just like to thank you, Paul, and your group for the great work that you're doing in the Otama area. I have to admit that it's almost 40 years since I visited your wetland, and so I will intend to come back at some point and have another look and see how much it's changed. So, yeah, thank you for your submission and thank you for your good work. Cheers.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Paul. Appreciate your
Madam
time
Chair,
today.
may I
Yes.
ask?
Oh, did you have a question?
Yep,
Oh,
please.
yes, sorry, we've got a question, Paul, from Councillor Marr.
Yeah. Also like to thank you for your presentation, Paul. Is there any concern with the sale of the property adjacent to the reserve? I know you've worked well with landowners in the past.
There is concern in the fact that we'd like to have input into where the reserve contributions will be in relation to inundation levels and the existing protection of the wetland. There is a proposal for a 12-lot subdivision, which is included in the wetland restoration plan. Again, that's out of our field of expert. We have no input into what that's private land. So, and the farm is up for sale with that tagged on it, a 12-lot lifestyle subdivision. So, again, it all comes around. We would like to see the regulation of opening and closing in relation to protection of the wetland in relation to that proposed subdivision as well.
Thanks for that, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Paul. Appreciate your time submitting to WRC today.
Kia ora.
Thank you for joining us. All right, I do note, I see Mr. Habberfield-Short. I do see you online. I note that you're not before us until 10:20, but we do have space now. So if you are keen to come forward, we could go with that now. Great. All right, so this, councillors, is Brian Habberfield-Short. Speaking in relation to the Natural Heritage Fund. I'm not sure how do I, sorry, just one moment, Brian.
Right.
Agenda page 126. All right, over to you, Brian.
Ai, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Brian Habberfield ahau no Waikino, ki haura ki au. So I live in the southern end of the Coromandel Peninsula at Waikino, and if you've read my submission, I have been involved with various groups around predator control and also restoration planting. Most busy lately with help waihi, trading as waihi native plants, do a lot of plant raising and planting. And I was a founding member of a group currently running called Predator Free Hauraki Coromandel, which is Helen Saunders was in that, and a couple of other people that people you would know. Bruce Clarkson. So my submission was to support the raising of the targeted rate for natural heritage, which was I think just over $6. A cup of coffee annually, pretty minimum. But in the survey, they offered some options up to. The highest one suggested that you could vote for was $15, which is still these days only a couple of cups of coffee maybe bought for annually, which is still pretty minimum. I would say, personally, I'd be happy enough to pay $100 because I spend more than that personally anyway on that sort of activity. My points are, I suppose, are beyond what I wrote in my submission, if you can see it. My targeted local council rate for a decrepit local hall is $26, and everyone around here pays that and nobody says boo about it. You get a lot of leverage funding these volunteer groups. Hundreds and hundreds, thousands of hours of labour that council don't pay for, and a lot of people contribute their own finances for equipment and that sort of thing. There's issues around the activities that are funded with the small scale fund, and that quite often groups might get funding one year, get something going, and then not get funding the next year. So continuity, as you should all know, has been an issue. So that's an issue. Good news is we're seeing a lot of results in some areas, some parts of the Coromandel in particular with the Kiwi, and along with those, because the Kiwi are targeted by some groups, particularly Kiwi care groups, but a lot of other species are benefiting from the work that they do. Along with and in the Greater Waikato, of course, there's the Hamilton Halo, and everybody in the town in Hamilton has seen the results of that. So it's working, and I think it needs to not only keep going, but just be maintained, but boosted, because the gains can be huge. Other points that there's an economic benefit in pest control of rodents and that sort of thing. There's costs to households and industry and everything, production through rodents, so that there's people don't look at that sort of thing. And another thing I'd say is that it's important that council back up the volunteer efforts with as much landscape scale predator control in harder to access areas as possible, and in that to go with the science and not all the misinformation that still surrounds that. So I'm quite happy to take questions.
Are there any questions from councillors? Any points of clarification?
All right. I'd just like to say thanks,
Graf.
Brian, for your advocacy work for predator control on the Coromandel, etc. And thanks for your presentation today on behalf of Regional Council. Thanks.
Kia ora koutou. Ka kite.
Thanks, Brian. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, and I wanted to thank you as well, Brian. I know what hard work it is, and I know how difficult it is to keep that continuity going. But I also wanted to pick up on the suggestion you made about donations. And I think that's something that we as a council should be thinking about when we move into the next phase of our deliberations, whether or not there is a mechanism available to allow that sort of thing to happen, where people who are prepared to pay some additional funding might be able to do it through the website. Thank you for that suggestion.
Kia ora.
All right, thank you for your time today, Brian.
Ka kite.
All right. I do note that we have Councillor Thomson from Hamilton City Council in the room. If you're happy to come forward now, we'll just bring that submission forward. So this is on agenda page 1011.
Sounds like you guys have had a lot of reading.
Welcome, Sarah.
You don't have anything to do in your evenings, right? Morena koutou, thank you so much for the opportunity to present this morning. Firstly, congratulations on all of the work that has gone into preparing your draft LTP. It's always a very big undertaking, and also going through all those submissions. I also want to just acknowledge the really positive relationship that we have with your council. We really appreciate the regular governance meetings that we have with the Hamilton City representatives, the partnership that we have with Future Proof, and also the Public Transport Subcommittee. So want to acknowledge all of the effort that goes into all of those relationships. I will take our submission as read, but just highlight a few key things. Overall, we really support your draft long-term plan. We support the change to the regional rating model for the public transport. That was a really key action under the Public Transport Improvement Review, and it will in the future simplify and make the whole process of rating more efficient. I understand there may be some different things to work through in terms of how it's rolled out, but the overall idea of taking a regional approach, I think, is a really good step forward. And well, our council believes so as well. We also support the investment in increasing the frequency of the buses in Hamilton. We have seen awesome uptake with the Comet and more recently the Meteor. The Meteor, I understand, once it has 180% increase in numbers compared to the original 2 slower routes which it replaced. So that frequency really does work in getting people to take public transport, and that's critical for the city because we're fast growing. We were the fastest growing city in the country in the last year, with a net increase of over 6,000 people coming to the city. And if all of those people are in cars, it will turn into gridlock. The high frequency direct buses really work, and Hamilton City Council is also investing money into infrastructure to improve those routes as well. For example, ensuring that people can cross the road to get to bus stops. We're also looking at how we can prioritise buses with traffic lights and with infrastructure. So we are really keen to continue working closely with the Regional Council on those frequent routes. We support Tahuia going forward. There's some challenges, I imagine, to overcome, particularly with the review later this week. But inter-regional connection is critical for our city and for the wider region in terms of our economy, but also the social impact that it has for people as well. And Hamilton has made a significant investment in the Rotakoti Transport Hub. That was $29 million, and with Hamilton putting in about half of that. So there is a lot of infrastructure that's already in place, and we would love to see those services continue. So support your continued investment in Tahuia. Finally, we also support the natural heritage rate. Hamilton City Council has been also investing in biodiversity within the city with our Nature in the City program. And as the previous submitter said, there's a lot of volunteer hours that go into looking after the gullies within Hamilton, where there are pockets of, I guess, the greatest potential for biodiversity within the city, and also provide really critical services around stormwater. They're a critical asset in terms of our stormwater. And so, but volunteer work alone is definitely not enough. There's a need for partnership, and so we really support Waikato Regional Council also increasing that investment to support those volunteers and the great work that's happening. Finally, we just want to acknowledge Project Watershed, the continued partnership that we have there to address erosion issues in the gully and the river networks. So yeah, there's some really good work happening there, and we appreciate the continued support for that work. I will leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Strange.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thomson, for your submission. And yeah, we do acknowledge as well the relationship between our two councils, and yeah, looking forward to continuing that as well. In your high-level summary in your submission, you mentioned about resourcing a business and community liaison lead role in order to maximise existing public transport services. Could you just expand on what you see the co-benefits of that and what that could look like?
Thank you. So this was something that was brought up in the Public Transport Subcommittee. Essentially, it's looking at how do we maximise ridership with our existing, well, with your existing services and existing public transport networks that are there, and then ensure that we maximise that ridership also going forward as improvements are made. So it's working directly with the likes of retirement villages, schools, but also businesses. There are a lot of businesses out there. We've heard, for example, from businesses in Te Rapa, when our economic development team have gone out to speak with them, that public transport for their employees is really important. So how do we support local businesses and economy and employees getting access to employment through public transport? There's lots of opportunities actually for partnership in that space, as well as in terms of, for example, developing the flex model further. So it really is going out and looking at those partnership opportunities to ensure that we can make the most of the existing services and those going forward.
The answer. Just one further question. We do hear a lot of criticism about empty buses going around. You did mention retirement villages. Would you see that as making use of off-peak services when those buses might appear less empty? That would be a good way to maximise their travel.
Yes, absolutely. And there's also, for example, opportunities to work with schools. Can we work with them to slightly adjust timetables for starting and finishing times so that we can spread the load over in the morning and afternoon peaks. So I think there are lots of opportunities to increase patronage throughout the day. And while staff would need to look at, I guess, do further analysis, it would be a good question to ask as to how much it would pay for itself in terms of increased fare revenue as well. So, but I obviously can't comment on that other than to suggest looking into it.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Yes, Councillor. One of the issues we're dealing with is Te Waka, and you have referenced that in your submission. You talk about councils, Hamilton City's happy to work with us to more effectively coordinate and fund regional transport. That's item 75. And you advocate for us to continue the 750k per year. However, we notice Hamilton City is potentially cutting its own funding to Te Waka while advocating for us to continue ours. And wondered if you have a view, or council has a view, on the effectiveness of the current model and how it could be better moved forward. You mentioned there Waikato tourism as something that could also be considered integrated.
Yeah, so there are views around around our council table that there could be the opportunity for some more integration, for example, having less organisations so that there's, I guess, potentially some less duplication around governance and overheads and things. In terms of, and that actually was raised at the Mayoral Forum recently, and I understand it's a piece of work that is the Regional Council is potentially looking at. Is that right? Or it's being considered through the Mayoral Forum. So how do we ensure that there is the greatest efficiency in terms of regional economic development? In regard to Hamilton City Council's own contribution, Hamilton City Council has essentially cut all of its grants and funding by 20%. However, I would encourage you to also present to our long-term plan. We've got hearings over the next 3 days, and I expect someone from your council will be coming to speak. And so just like your long-term plan, nothing's locked in. It has currently been reduced by 20%. Yeah, I think it's worth bringing up in our long-term plan hearings.
And do you have any models for how more effective coordination could occur? Like, because the minute we fund for 3 years, that kind of locks it in the current model. So obviously there is a desire here for a more effective. I mean, the government has signalled it's important to have a regional voice for these sorts of things, but does Hamilton City have any views about how we could better coordinate with you?
Not a formal view, so I won't delve into that right now because I am here representing the council position. However, as mentioned, the Mayoral Forum is looking at that as a piece of work, and my understanding is that we always have, our councils always have annual plans. So while something could be put in for 3 years of funding, there's nothing stopping once a model has been investigated and approved by councils, there's nothing stopping a review of how the funding model would work at an annual plan. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Good answer. Cheers.
Councillor Nicol.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomson, for the Hamilton City presentation. I have 2 questions. One is in relation to the local climate change risk assessment, the other one about the metro spatial plan. I read these submissions from other district councils and city councils to look for the niggles of where we might have councils bring up things where we could do better. And so under point 67 in the submission, it talks about Hamilton City was involved in the risk identification in 2022, has had no further involvement with the local climate risk assessment project. And we see it as being key to inform our own local risk assessment and other work. Is it your impression from your involvement in that work that regional council, having not finished its local climate risk assessment, is holding up your work in any way with your adaptation planning? I actually don't know the answer to this, I'm curious.
Right, no, that's, I think that's something that if we have any staff online, I would be asking them to answer. But what I can
So it
do
hasn't
is
been discussed
I
yet.
can ask for an email from our climate
that'd be
team.
great.
So your question, Councillor.
Just if we're
Nicol,
holding
is,
you up with it, it just looked like.
what's the impact of this
Yeah,
on
that's right.
Hamilton City Council's work around adaptation?
Thank you. And the other one was, just because it was in bold, the second bullet point on point 40, this emphasis on the short-term building towards the metro spatial plan is missing from the 2024 RLTP in our view. I was just hoping you could expand on that, what you're keen to see there.
Yes, so I also had the pleasure of presenting on the RLTP. Essentially, what Hamilton City Council was submitting was that there needs to just be in the regional land transport plan emphasis on the importance of work, I guess, all of those little steps that are required to actually get to the point where we have a rapid transit network in the future. So it's not a case of we're going to build a rapid bus route tomorrow. Actually, it's looking at gradually increasing frequency of different routes, gradually increasing the priority so that we have then the basis for moving to the next step again of, say, a rapid bus route. So all of those improvements, particularly increasing frequency as we've, and having that grid network where people can easily get anywhere within the city with only one, at most one interchange is really critical, and that will form a foundation of rapid transit model going forward. So it's just saying it's an iterative process, and while these might be smaller projects and smaller improvements, they all add up, and yeah, it's building towards the future. And so we were saying that really needs to be emphasised because those low cost, low risk projects are actually really critical for us to move to, I guess, that a future that we're looking for in our joint vision of transport going forward.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
What Just wondering, Councillor Thomson, if you wanted to expand on the regional spatial planning piece and how HCC views that, how they view their role in it alongside us, and the contribution that may make to the region.
So my understanding is that our staff are happy to support that process and ensure that there is a key person that can be a key contact for the regional council, and provide in-kind support with staff time and providing necessary information and advice and input. Yes. So we do support this. I think one of the things we highlighted was just the need for it to be complementary to the work that Future Proof is doing. And my understanding is that's the intention. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? No? All right. Councillor Marr, would you like to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thomson, for presenting today. Very comprehensive report and covering it. Really interested in your council's feedback on where we're going with the spatial plan and also the economic development. So it's something that's been highly talked about around this table. So yeah, thank you for coming and speaking to us in person today.
Okay, thank you.
Much appreciated.
And I'll ensure that we get back on the question around the climate adaptation, and also I look forward to your submission in the next few days to our council. Thank you.
It's interesting how many councils have chosen this very week for all of the hearings, and so trying to get around to everybody and then get to us has been challenging. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank
Really
you very
appreciate
much.
it.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. And all the best for the rest of your hearings.
All right, councillors, that is everybody that we had scheduled prior to morning tea. So our next presenter is on at 10:40. Oh, they've just arrived. Are we feeling like squeezing them in now? Great. Oh, I love it. Everybody driving for efficiency. That's fantastic. Okay. Sorry? Oh. I see you've joined us, Ms. Wallace. Oh, you're just on mute there, Cath.
Yeah, my apologies. Sorry, I didn't realise I was coming immediately through onto your audio. Are you ready for me, or am I?
I'll just introduce. So we've got Cath Wallace, councillors, and her submission is on page 113 in relation to natural heritage. All right, Ms. Wallace, you have 5 minutes, and if you would like to allow time for questions, we'll accommodate that.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I thought I was just setting up and not coming straight through to
Well, we had space, so we thought we'd bring you forward if you're ready to go.
I just hadn't pulled the curtains behind me, so apologies for the slightly. It looks on your side a little bit like we've got some strange solar event going on. Anyway, I'm Cath Wallace, and I am really concerned about the loss of biodiversity around the nation, but particularly, of course, in the Waikato Coromandel. And I should put on the table right at the beginning that our farm has had some help from Waikato Regional Council on matters to do with biosecurity. We have a 827 hectare coastal block on the east coast of the Coromandel. And so I'm just wanting to make it clear that, I might have a conflict of interest, but much more profoundly, we're really concerned about threats to biodiversity, also threats from climate change, and the two are very closely related. And we are We took, well, I should say my parents took steps to protect bush on our farm when they bought it in the 1960s. We now operate it with some livestock, but quite a lot of bush. But there's also a lot of regenerating stuff that is not properly protected because we can't afford fences. But much more generally, I think that especially with MPI being told to cut expenditure, and I hear they're going to cut a lot of that through biosecurity measures or cutting biosecurity. I think the regional council is in a way the last bastion, apart from private efforts, to protect biodiversity. And I think the whole community, even though everyone is stressed for money, I think they do understand that protecting our natural capital, making sure that we're not putting biodiversity at further risk, I think that is quite widely accepted, though obviously from the current government we know that not everyone is of that mind. And we would like the regional council to step up to help protect, and particularly to help get the expertise, for instance, that your biosecurity people give us, and to protect what's left. And I also mentioned in my very short submission that I would really like to see the regional council standing steadfast against the fast track bill because of the enormous amount of damage mining activities and various others can do. And you may or may not be aware that there's a huge 29,000 hectare couple of applications from an Australian magnate called Clive Palmer, which stretches up a great deal of the east coast of the Coromandel. And I really don't see why those of us who have cherished and looked after and foregone income over the years should be overridden by the interests of an Australian mining magnate. Thanks. I'm open for questions.
Thank you for that, Ms. Wallace. We've got a question from Councillor Marr and then Councillor Strange. Councillor Marr.
Thanks for presenting to us today, Cath. Is there an imbalance in the protection between plant pests and animal pests, do you see?
Well, I think, we have to go across all of them. Yes, I think plant pests do tend to get ignored and they're damn tricky to deal with. But we've also got to deal with pathogens, and we've had to more or less stop people visiting our farm in order to try and stop curry dieback coming in. But, we need to tackle them all. And yes, you're right, plant pests are not getting the attention they deserve, but then so are some of the insect pests as well.
Thanks for that, Cath.
Councillor Strange.
Yeah, thank you, Cath, and thank you for the work that you do up in your area. Just noting that you've shown option 2, increasing the rate to $15 per property. Could you just expand on your reasons for choosing the 15 as opposed to the other 2 options?
Well, my memory is they were 10 and 5, is that correct?
8, 68 and 5, which is has $5.80, hasn't changed since 2018.
Sorry, what was that again? 8?
8.68 or $5.80.
I'm sorry, I must have completely misunderstood that, because actually I would go for the top level.
Oh yeah, the top was $15, which you did choose.
Oh, okay. Well, the reason for that is just simply that the need is so pressing, and with central government seemingly not only backing off supporting conservation, but likely to encourage damage to biodiversity, I just think it's very important. And with us, for instance, we've got a big block by local standards, and we don't demand an awful lot of services from the regional council because we are lightly settled, but we do forego a tremendous amount of income, and I think that people value it. There's a considerable public good, and the more that people can have recourse to the outdoors and get the benefits of having ecosystems functioning, the more benefit they get, even if it's not immediately available to them from the point of view of private property that's been shut for biosecurity reasons.
Thank you for that. Appreciate your answers.
Councillor Kneebone.
Thank you, Kath. Just want to acknowledge the lifetime's work and effort you've contributed to this kaupapa, both in active restoration and in the sort of policy space as well. It's really appreciated. So really appreciated your considered submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I must admit that the fast track bill meant that I didn't make a very substantial submission on this. And for those of you who don't know, I've had a lifetime of working in environmental policy and environmental economics and with the environmental conservation organisations. But thank you for the thanks.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, look, I just wanted to add my thanks. Thanks, Kath, Bruce Clarkson here, and not just for your efforts, but the deep legacy your family has given conservation matters in the Waikato. As you probably know, I was lectured by Charlotte, and so it's that overall contribution that you and your family have made to the conservation in the Waikato. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I've always stood in admiration of you for the work you've done. So I think it's a mutual admiration society.
Fantastic. We like those kinds of societies. They're good ones. Hey, thank you so much, Kath. If there's nothing else.
I'll bail out. Thank you. If there's no one else. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, councillors. So our next submitter is scheduled for 10:55. So we will adjourn until then.